Welcome and great to have you join us as we go off script with Sam Monk, Senior Leader of Equippers Church. Enjoy today's podcast.
Hi and welcome to episode 6 of Off Script with Sam Monk. We're talking about what's worked, what hasn't, and leadership lessons. Sam, welcome back to episode 6.
Come on, let's do it.
Here we go. So Sam, we talked about on episode 5, we were reminding ourselves and probably tracking back from way back when we saw a Huggies advert on TV. And if you didn't hear me singing in that advert...
Sing it again, man.
Well,
Sing it again.
I don't want to, but I think people want to hear it. So it goes, Mummy, wow, I'm a big kid now.
Yeah.
And it was really talking about kids progressing from nappies to sort of pull-ups or to pants.
Yeah, it's the in-between place between nappies and underwear where kids are learning to deal with their own mess.
Yeah, right.
Isn't that an amazing day when your kid learns to go to the bathroom by themselves?
It's an amazing day. Not only that, but dealing with everything that contains with that as well. And you don't have to go in and help them out. It's a brilliant place to be in.
It's quite a messy season, but pull-ups help during that season. And really, in terms of our growth is really taking responsibility for the mess that we create in our life. Because a lot of people like to attribute blame to a whole lot of different things for where they're at and why they're in the mess they're in. And I think part of adulthood is growing up.
Isn't that, that's one thing that people could really try and figure out, isn't it? That actually we are responsible.
Yeah.
And there's some really good books around that stuff as well, taking responsibility, and actually you are responsible for your own life. But why don't you just expand a bit on responsibility, and what does that look like for us, taking responsibility? Yeah,
well, it's realizing that we are accountable for our lives, that one day we're going to have to stand before our Creator and give an account for what God's given us, not what God's given another person.
Right.
Sometimes we're like, here I am, God, send him, send her. Because they're more capable, we think, but not realizing that God's given us gifts, He's given us an assignment to fulfill. And it's really finding out what that is and stepping into it. I think today there's a big thing, when it comes to responsibility is understanding personal autonomy.
Right.
That we are responsible for the decisions that we make. And we all have choice. Choice is something that God's given us.
Yep.
And in fact, anything that removes choice is dangerous.
Yeah.
And in leadership, sometimes we can try and coerce or manipulate situations. But I think the strength of leadership, if you look how God leads, He gives us choice. He's got put blessing and cursing, life and death before us. He says, choose life. But we've all got a decision to make, and autonomy is really critical to life. In fact, personal autonomy, where you have to live out your conviction and you have to own your decisions and you have to own the implications of those decisions,
right.
I think is a healthy place to be.
So autonomy, so I can do what I want to do?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I got choice. I got choice, and that means I've got to take responsibility for things like my attitude.
Yeah,
nobody can determine my attitude.
He made me do that. She made me do that.
Yeah, well, I'm a
result of this.
A little kid often blames the soft toy in the corner and said, "The elephant made me do it."
Yeah.
We've all
do we ever graduate from that as well? The government made me do it. This made me do it.
Yeah, but we get to decide our attitude. In fact, I spent a good amount of time in hospital, 42 days, and the prognosis wasn't getting any better. And I thought I had a right to have a bad attitude. Kathy would come in and I'd be a little bit short and sharp with her. I felt the Holy Spirit just confront me on that. And He says, Sam, if you've got a bad attitude, it's because you've chosen it.
To be there, wow.
Yeah, because what you're going through, you can handle. But if you can't handle it, I'm going to make a way of escape. Right. And so, just my hospital bed, having to say, God, I changed my mind and I changed my attitude, and I had to turn some things around and say, God, I'm thankful in this. I'm not thankful for it, but I'm going to be thankful in it.
Yeah.
And just finding God in the midst of that was.
We should get Kathy on the podcast to make sure that she was like, did Sam actually do that? But it's easy to justify, isn't it?
Yeah.
We can easily justify and go, well, if you knew my situation, if you knew my background, if you knew where I didn't have all the same cards that you were dealt, and it's easy to justify and help to explain our kind of behavior away, right?
Yeah, well, it's not what's happened to you. In life we all go through tough things. We have our challenges, and everybody's challenge is different. And I don't seek to understand everything people have gone through, but God does. But it's more about our response to what we face. And I think big thing is, we go through the fire. The test is, do we come out smelling like what we went through?
Yeah.
And a lot of people smell like what they went through rather than any test or trial that we go through. We should come out smelling like Jesus.
Yeah. that's
the
a
challenge.
Good goal.
That's the challenge. Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah.
So autonomy gives us, so we have the freedom to choose.
Yeah.
So that goes both ways though.
Yeah.
So we can choose to not have a different so to have a good attitude about things. We can choose to the way that we respond, but it kind of does go both ways, doesn't it? We can also choose.
Well, we can make bad choices. The world's, it shows us, and I'm sure we've all made bad choices before. I think one of the bad choices that we can make in the kingdom, though, is choices around being independent.
Right.
And there's a difference between autonomy. Autonomy gives you the freedom to choose, but what I'd say is independence is a bad choice. And many people confuse those two things. Autonomy helps you grow up, helps you mature, helps you take responsibility for your life. Independence is dangerous in that it can separate you from the very thing God's called you to be a part of. And I like 1 Corinthians chapter 12. It talks about how we are one body. We are all part of one body. If you believe in Jesus, we're all part of this thing. We're one body. We have many parts, but we're part of one body. In fact, it goes right through. You read 1 Corinthians chapter 12, it goes over and over that again, just emphasizing many parts, but one body. And I've got a part to play. You've got a part to play, a significant part, an important part, a valuable part, but it's just a part. None of us are the whole. And so in my autonomy, I can choose to separate myself from the whole, but I'm actually missing out on how the way God's designed this to work. And life works when I'm in community, when I choose to submit myself to others, when I choose to be in relationship. And it's not a forced thing, it's a decision.
How do we get people to kind of understand that, I guess? Because so often, I guess the biggest thing that I know I struggle with, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, the biggest thing that we can struggle with is our pride, right?
Yeah.
So our pride can want to jump up and go, oh no, we can figure this thing out. And I think the challenge of every one of us is to, when we get into a situation, we think we're clever enough to navigate through it ourselves. I'll just try and white knuckle it, and I'll just get through it, and I'll push through, and I'll be okay. Yeah. But 1 Corinthians 12 really says, well, actually, you've got a whole body here that you're a part of. You might be a hand, but a hand can only do certain things, and a foot can only do certain things, and you can't walk on your hands. So it talks about different parts of the body having different functions, right?
Yeah, and it says, what if the whole body were an eye?
Yeah.
Well, that would be freaky. That would be weird. And so we've got different functions and different roles, and a healthy maturity understands that I'm not the answer to everything, nor do I have to be the answer to everything. Right. And there's answers in other people, and other people have different gifts and graces that I do. And it's saying I can rely on them. I think the danger in life is we have unhealthy dependencies, and we rely on structures, and we rely on other people to do what we can do for ourselves.
So an unhealthy dependency is where I'm never really making any calls. I'm always relying on somebody else to do what I probably should be doing myself.
Yeah.
Right, so this goes back to the Huggies, the nappy analogy. I should be in underwear now, but I'm still in nappies.
Yeah. Well, at university, I had one friend. At the beginning of university, we did this typing course. He said, "I don't need to do that. My girlfriend, she's a really good typer."
He didn't.
And so she used to type out all his assignments for him. But the problem was, in the last year of university, they broke up. And so his unhealthy dependency was exposed because the assignments had got longer, and he was having to bust out something like a 10,000 word essay with two fingers because he never grew up in that area. It would be tragic if a 30-year-old still needed somebody else to tie their shoelaces.
Right.
And sometimes in our own faith, we're still looking to others to actually do things for us. And so that's unhealthy dependency. And in fact, I love Psalm 131 where it says, I do not concern myself with matters beyond my grasp. I mean, there's so many things outside of ourselves that, it's beyond us.
Yeah.
It's far and beyond us. But he says, the psalmist says, my soul is like that of a weaned child. My soul is at rest, and it talks about how the psalmist says, I'm going to put my faith and hope in God. And I think, we need to look at what we need to wean off, because some of us have actually, we're too dependent on others, but some of us are also not dependent enough because we've got this unhealthy sense of I need to be the answer to everything, but that's working against design.
Wow. Yeah, it's quite a spectrum, isn't it? I guess so that's the tricky thing, isn't it? Because it's not really one answer to this. You've actually got to figure out where you probably are on that spectrum. Are you that 30-year-old person that's still having to, that's not eating solid food, or are you relying on solid food too much? And you actually need to be asking for help and need to be putting your hand up, and I guess the recognition that it's a pretty humbling thing to do, isn't it? To recognize that actually, I can't be the answer to everybody's problems. I can't be the solution to everything.
Yeah, well, I think sometimes people go, well, God's going to give me the answer. God's going to give me the answer. But what we don't realize is a lot of the time God puts the answer inside somebody else.
Yeah.
And it actually takes humility of heart to be able to access the answer in somebody else.
Yeah.
Sometimes in our pride we go, no, I want it direct from God.
Yeah.
It's like the guy in the flood on top of the roof. A lifeboat comes and he goes, oh, no, God's going to rescue me. Helicopter comes, oh, no, God's going to rescue me. He ends up dying because of the flood and then complains at God, why didn't you rescue me? He says, I did. I sent the guy on the lifeboat and I sent I sent the helicopter, but he didn't recognize it. And so often God actually sends us answers, but we don't have the humility of heart to actually recognize that sometimes our answers are found in the people that God's put around us.
And that's really good. Yeah, that's really good, because we got to recognize that the dangers of not doing that and I guess when you grow up and say, we talked about children, I think in the last episode, when you grow up and have children, you realize you kind of can't just do what you want to do anymore. There's other people that get impacted by your decisions. When you get married, you realize you can't just do what you want to do. There's someone else to think about now as well. And so there's a very real thing of the independence. You might think you live a life that's independent, but actually your decisions really do affect other people, don't they?
Our decisions,
no matter what you think.
Yeah, definitely our decisions have an impact on the people around us. I like to think of us as we're pages and we're novelists. So somebody's written their story on our heart. My story is not separate from my parents' story. It's integrated, it's interwoven. Nor is my story separate from that of my kids. So I'm writing on somebody else's heart. So somebody's written on our heart. The stories of our life are written on the hearts of the people that we encounter on a daily basis. And, our decisions affect the people in our world. And independent attitude says I can just do whatever I want with my life. It's my life. I do what I can. Correct. That is correct.
You're free to do that.
You're free because you got autonomy. But independence would say independence doesn't realize how that has implications or how that affects those who are close to us in our world.
Wow. And I guess there's also independence also probably recognize the fact that you might want access to the whole, but you actually only want to sometimes be a part of it. So you want the benefits of the whole sometimes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You want the kind of like, I want everything, but I'm only prepared to kind of maybe give this much of it.
Yeah, I think we're opening up quite a big subject.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to do a part 2 of this one.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because there's a number of independent attitudes that we've actually got to look in the mirror and see whether they exist in ourselves. Because as I've looked in the mirror, I'm going, that's probably not what I want in my life.
Right.
And that's probably actually sealing my growth and my maturity.
And good thing, I think you often talk about, and I'm paraphrasing for you, but before you go to sleep at night, that's almost that prayer of David, like, Lord, see if there's any wicked way within me, like how have I gone today with some of this. It's a good prayer to pray, isn't it? To kind of finish off your day going, just checking your heart kind of thing.
Checking your heart, allowing God to search your heart. It's not a witch hunt, but
Yeah.
also at the end of the day, asking yourself the question: have I done my best? Because if you've done your best,
Yeah.
God's not asking anything more than your best,
Yeah.
and you can sleep easy, knowing that God's working for you while you're sleeping.
Yeah.
And I think that's a comforting thing, and knowing that there's other people around you that God's gifted and graced, who are called alongside you
Yeah.
to help you in the mission.
Yeah, and great to be a part of an organisation, I guess, no matter what you are or whatever fraternity you're part of. People always, I love that thought that God often puts the answers in people around us. That's a really good thing to think about, that actually it's not just about our relationship with God. It's not just an upward relationship, but it's much more of the horizontal relationships that really are significant too.
Yeah.
So, hey, that was episode 6 of Off Script with Sam Monk. And again, we really hope this has been useful to you in whatever workplace, organisation that you find yourself in your homes as well. But we've had fun talking about this stuff. We really believe that significant ministry does flow. It does flow to significant relationships with one another. And again, we'd love you to be part of our family. Subscribe to all of the things that we're a part of here at all the different places that you get your podcast. Share it with people if it's been helpful to you. Otherwise, we'll see you next time for episode 7 of Off Script with Sam Monk.
Thanks for listening to Off Script with Sam Monk. If you found this podcast helpful, make sure you pass it on. We love your feedback, so drop us a line about what topics you'd like to hear about on Off Script with Sam Monk.